Usato, a typical high school student, was unexpectedly selected to become a healer in an isekai world. Despite his ordinary life and average grades, his abilities exceed those of the legendary heroes. He's a compassionate person who helps birds in his daily life, dreaming of a more thrilling life in a magical world, to break free from his dull routine. One day, his umbrella is stolen, and he decides to wait out the rain, as he believes that he shouldn't get wet. However, the rain shows no signs of stopping. Suddenly, he's approached by Suzune, the student council president. She inquires about his situation and learns that he's without an umbrella. She informs him that the school is about to close, which Usato interprets as a hint to leave. As he prepares to depart, the flawless president stops him, insisting that she won't let him get soaked. Suddenly, the vice president, Kazuki, the quintessential perfect guy, appears and offers Usato his spare umbrella. Suzune asks if they're friends, but Kazuki clarifies that they're just classmates. Usato is taken aback, as he had never interacted with them before. He realizes that he fits the stereotype of the unattractive but kind-hearted guy. Grateful for the umbrella, Usato thanks Kazuki, who then wonders what he should call him. Suzune intervenes, stating that she will also address him as Usato. Misinterpreting her friendliness as flirtation, Usato blushes. They invite him to walk home with them, an opportunity he can hardly believe he's been given. As they walk, Usato explains that Kazuki usually only converses with girls. Kazuki clarifies that he simply responds to their questions. Suzune playfully teases Kazuki about his popularity, and Usato tries to join in. He compliments Suzune, likening her to a goddess, despite his own lack of social interaction. Suzune modestly describes herself as an average student, but Kazuki chimes in, praising her perfection. He highlights her academic excellence, athletic prowess, kindness, and beauty. Intrigued, Usato asks if they are a couple. They seem puzzled, but explain that they're just close because of their shared responsibilities on the student council. Suzune is impressed that Usato was bold enough to ask. When Suzune inquires about Usato's future plans, he admits that he intends to continue living in his mother's basement. Kazuki notes that Suzune poses this question to everyone. Suzune admits that her curiosity stems from her lack of future plans. Usato questions this, and she explains that she tends to achieve her goals quickly. This rapid success leaves her feeling isolated and out of place. Usato finds a connection in their shared feelings of displacement. Suddenly, Suzune and Kazuki hear a bell ringing and halt. Usato, confused, asks about the situation. Kazuki questions if he heard the bell, but Usato did not. The bell rings again, louder this time, but still, Usato hears nothing. As he moves closer, a magic circle materializes beneath them. Kazuki panics, but Usato calmly states that they are being transported to another world. Kazuki dismisses him as delusional, but Suzune's reaction surprises them. She smiles, asking if they are headed to a world filled with magic, monsters, and heroes. Usato is taken aback by Suzune's enthusiasm for such things. Moments later, they open their eyes to find themselves in an unfamiliar room. Upon surveying their surroundings, they spot an elderly man seated on a throne. Usato finds himself bewildered by his new surroundings and its inhabitants, a sentiment not shared by Kazuki. He turns to find Suzune, who is visibly excited and grinning at the prospect of being in another world. He can't help but think she's lost her mind. The elderly man seated on the throne, seemingly pleased that they've awakened, introduces himself as Lloyd, the King of Linger. While Kazuki is perplexed, Suzune appears thrilled. Lloyd explains that they have been summoned as heroes, a revelation that only adds to Suzune's joy. The king goes on to explain their predicament. A resurrected demon lord is amassing an army. The kingdom has been under siege for the past 2 years, barely holding on. Their last hope was to use a forbidden spell to summon heroes from another world to combat the threat. Suzune's enthusiasm never wanes, even as she learns more about their situation. However, Kazuki becomes irate, accusing the king of selfishly dragging them into this mess. He demands to be sent back to their world, but the king explains that the summoning only works one way. Kazuki continues to protest, reminding the king of their families back home. The king admits their desperation, But Kazuki remains unmoved. His anger escalates, prompting the soldiers to raise their weapons in response. Usato attempts to defuse the situation, and Kazuki finally heeds his advice. The king steps forward, kneeling before Kazuki and vowing to find a way to return them home once their mission is complete. The others follow suit, also kneeling. Suzune queries the king about their designation as heroes. The king directs Welsi, his mage, to elucidate. She explains that the summoning spell targets individuals with the potential to become heroes. In essence, those with this potential will hear the sound of a bell ringing. Suzune and Kazuki grasp this stipulation, but then recall that Usato's experience was different. They question him about not hearing anything, and he confirms, indicating that his presence here is accidental. They proceed to Welsi's room to assess their magical aptitude. The task is simple: touch the crystal ball and discover which magic they can wield. Suzune is visibly excited as Welsi begins preparations for the test. Meanwhile, Kazuki checks in with Usato, asking if he's okay with everything. Usato assures him that he's fine, as Welsi had already informed him that he could likely still use magic, even if he couldn't be a hero. However, Kazuki is referring to the involuntary nature of their summoning. In Usato's case, they didn't even want him. Usato dismisses this, stating that it's exactly what he wanted. Kazuki finds Usato's nonchalance surprising, but points out that Suzune is the real anomaly. They observe her eccentric behavior and agree that she's indeed unusual. Kazuki attributes this to her optimism, but Usato knows that's not the case. Suddenly, they notice the crystal ball glowing. Suzune is instructed to commence her test. Suzune eagerly touches the crystal ball, which emits a yellow glow. Welsi interprets this as an indication of her ability to wield thunder magic and her substantial mana reserves. Kazuki observes Suzune's joy, but Usato understands that this magic aligns perfectly with her fantasy dreams. Kazuki then interacts with the crystal ball, causing it to turn white. Welsi identifies this as a white attribute. Suzune's excitement peaks as she suggests he use a laser beam, but Usato advises her to tone down her enthusiasm. Usato is taken aback, having previously perceived her as the ideal girl, only to discover her quirky side. Welsi elaborates that light magic, like Kazuki's, is the most potent attribute as it can counter the Demon Lord. Usato decides to give it a try, but the crystal flashes green. Suzune and Kazuki find the color soothing and ask Welsi about the attribute. However, Welsi panics, grabs Usato's hand, and rushes back to the throne room. The king, puzzled, inquires if they've already determined their aptitudes. Welsi affirms, mentioning the immense potential of Kazuki and Suzune, but highlights a problem with Usato. The king jests, asking if Usato possesses the power to control darkness, but is stunned to learn that the crystal turned green. Welsi starts to explain his rare attribute, but the king silences her, leaving Usato to wonder if his attribute is undesirable. The king begins to strategize, suggesting they relocate Usato as far from the castle as possible. However, he doubts the existence of a safe place and considers hiding him in town temporarily. As a woman strides down the hallway, the king instructs his guards to prepare. Usato, however, is perplexed and questions if he poses a threat or if there's another with his attribute. The king, visibly alarmed, confirms there is, but warns that this individual spells trouble. Suddenly, the woman enters the throne room, startling everyone. This is the person the king had been referring to. She inquires about the outcome of the summoning ritual and whether the heroes have arrived. The king attempts to maintain his composure, casually asking if she isn't supposed to be off duty. She dismisses the notion of taking a day off. Upon noticing Usato, she questions if he's one of the heroes. Usato recoils in fear, prompting the king to clarify that Usato was mistakenly summoned along with the heroes. He dismisses Usato as an ordinary individual, but she notices the king's nervousness. She introduces herself as Rose, the captain of the rescue team, despite Usato's impression of her as more of a warrior than a rescuer. Welsi interjects, informing Rose that the heroes are awaiting her by the crystal ball. Rose agrees to accompany Welsi, preparing to depart. The king breathes a sigh of relief, believing everything went smoothly. He advises Usato to rest, while they determine how to handle his situation. Usato consents, but is curious about the meaning of his magic attribute. He naively asks about the significance of a green light. Upon hearing this, Rose halts, causing everyone in the room to panic. She turns back to Usato, asking if he mentioned green. Upon his confirmation, she informs the king that she will be taking Usato with her. In a state of panic, the king orders Welsi to remove Usato from the premises. Welsi casts a spell that forms a protective bubble around Usato, propelling him out of the castle. Rose, however, smiles and swiftly pursues him. As Welsi's bubble floats out of a window, carrying Usato away from the kingdom, Rose's remarkable speed and strength allow her to catch up. She calls out to the king, declaring her intention to train Usato as a healer before walking away. The king yells after her, accusing her of wanting to recruit more healers, despite Usato's accidental summoning. Rose disregards the king's protests and continues on her way. Back inside, Welsi explains to Suzune and Kazuki that Usato has been taken. They express concern for his safety, but Welsi assures them that he's not in danger. Kazuki demands an explanation. Welsi reveals that Usato was taken from the castle to join the rescue squad. She further explains that Usato's attribute is healing magic, a rarity in their world, and that Rose shares this attribute. Meanwhile, Rose carries Usato to her base, drawing the attention of a fox girl. This implies that upon arrival at the base, Usato's life will be akin to living in a nightmare. Rose clarifies that Usato has the aptitude to become a healer, a revelation that leaves him bewildered. She further unveils that he will be residing there indefinitely, which is why she brought him along. She summons the rest of the members, but Usato's first impression of them is that they resemble a group of bandits. Despite their menacing appearance, Rose instructs them to look after Usato. However, their intimidating stares make Usato feel like he's surrounded by serial killers. As he attempts to retreat in fear, the men introduce themselves in a manner that seems more like a hold-up than a friendly introduction. Rose intervenes by pushing Tong away when Usato starts to cry out of fear. The men protest, claiming they were merely trying to introduce themselves in a friendly manner. Rose then elaborates that while they are all part of the squad, they are not healers. In fact, her rescue squad only includes 2 other healers who are currently stationed elsewhere. This is why she has taken it upon herself to personally instruct Usato in the art of healing magic. Usato is terrified. He attempts to request a different instructor, but Rose dismisses his plea, announcing that training commences the following day. She instructs Tong to show Usato around and departs, leaving him with the bandit gang. In essence, he will be living in a nightmare. As night falls, Usato is initially consumed by worry. However, he soon comes to the realization that worrying is futile and succumbs to sleep. After he woke up, Usato hoped that this situation was just a dream. However, the reality was that he had been transported to another world. His friends, Suzune and Kazuki, came to see him after hearing about his abduction. Despite his post-traumatic stress disorder from the previous day's events, Usato reassured them, even though he was battling depression at the thought of the grueling training that lay ahead. Determined to prove his worth, Usato resolved to endure the training. Suzune mentioned that they would also be starting their training, and they all pledged to give it their best. As they departed, Usato felt a pang of guilt for their predicament, but he was quickly reminded of Suzune's enthusiasm for the situation. His aspiration was to become strong enough to support the 2 heroes. Miss Rose, their trainer, surprised Usato, but clarified that their training facility was not a prison. He was free to interact with anyone outside of training hours. She handed him a journal to document his daily training routine and his thoughts about it. The day started with breakfast, after which the dreaded training commenced. To Usato's surprise, the training wasn't as harsh as he had anticipated. The initial focus was on sensing the magical energy within him, which he was to master before moving on to other tasks. One of the tasks was reading, and Usato was astonished to find that he could understand the language of this new world, thanks to a translation magic cast on summoned heroes. Rose revealed the proximity of the Demon Lord's territory to the kingdom, explaining why they were always the first target of the demons. She left Usato with a book containing information about the demons and other races in this world, assigning him to study it. However, the second day proved to be a stark contrast, involving extensive running, which made him question the nature of magic training. On the third day, Usato was pushed to his physical limits. running until his muscles ached to the point of immobility. He collapsed, but Rose, their trainer, seemed unimpressed. Rose healed his aching muscles with a swift touch, leaving him stunned. She maintained a high level of intensity, urging him to run as if his life depended on it, promising to revive him if necessary. Unable to voice his disbelief at her extreme methods, Usato decided to vent his frustrations in his journal. The fourth day saw Usato training alongside other members, but he lagged behind, earning him ridicule from the others. Unable to retort, he resolved to express his feelings in his journal. The fifth and sixth days were filled with more running, with Rose constantly berating him. Usato's anger grew, and he planned to unleash his wrath in his journal. During this time, he was surprised to see a glow of healing magic on his hand, though he didn't feel the need for healing. The seventh day was grueling, with Usato running to the brink of exhaustion and Rose physically reprimanding him. He wondered if she had discovered his journal entries criticizing her, but realized she couldn't read Japanese. He suspected she could sense his resentment from his facial expressions. After being launched into the air by Rose, but on the ninth day, Usato realized the necessity of healing himself. He was amazed to find that he could heal his entire body, not just the injured parts. This revelation made him acknowledge the importance of healing magic. By the 10th day, Usato found that he no longer felt fatigue, regardless of how much he ran, thanks to his newfound ability to manifest healing magic at will. Despite this, he began to worry about his ability to assist his friends, given that his training consisted solely of running. He knew better than to voice his concerns to Rose, fearing her wrath. Rose was mad and made Usato run 30 more laps. Usato decided to just call her Rose, not Miss Rose. On the 11th day, push-ups were added to the training. Usato did over 800 push-ups. Rose explained that the training was to help Usato run fast in battle to save his hurt friends. On the 12th day, Usato ran until lunch and did push-ups until night. On the 13th day, Rose noticed Usato was feeling lighter, so she added weights. On the 14th day, Usato's lunch was eaten by someone else. Usato got mad and fought back. He was getting used to the weights and the training. A week later, Usato's friends visited him. They were surprised to see how much he had changed. Usato was doing hard push-ups, and Rose told him not to complain. Usato didn't complain, and even said that doing push-ups with Rose on his back was easy because she was light. Rose laughed and put another stone on his back. Usato was very determined, so his body healed and he finished the push-up. Rose was happy with his progress. Suzune was amazed by Usato's new muscles, and Kazuki knew the training was tough. A guy named Siglas was mad at Rose because he thought she was hurting Usato. Rose told him that she trained differently than the knights, and she was making Usato her right-hand man. She needed him to train hard. Usato was surprised to hear that she wanted him as her right-hand man. She explained that it was because he never gave up and he had survived her training. Usato quickly realized that his attempt to teach Rose a lesson had spectacularly backfired. Rose instructed him to take a break, and his friends were directed to join a girl named Celia for some downtime. Siglas informed Rose that he had been ordered to re-enlist her, but he declined to do so at that moment. During their lunch break, Usato discovered that Siglas was the commander of the kingdom's army, the strongest knight in the kingdom, and the one responsible for teaching Usato's friends swordsmanship. It was then that Usato recognized Celia as the princess and apologized for his casual demeanor. They all enjoyed a type of pie, and Kazuki questioned whether Usato's training was always as intense. Usato admitted that the day was different because it was easier. Kazuki noted that their training was progressing well, but it wasn't nearly as rigorous as Usato's. Suzune seemed to lose her composure as she interrupted their conversation to admire Usato's muscular physique. Kazuki managed to defuse the situation by asking if the training was too challenging for Usato. Usato confessed that the training was extremely difficult and that he initially wanted to escape. However, Rose's intimidating presence deterred him from fleeing. Despite the intensity, Usato found the training increasingly enjoyable and realized that life in this new world wasn't so bad. Usato's friends admired his resilience, but he simply attributed it to his stubbornness. He acknowledged that they would have to fight one day, and he wanted to be prepared to support them. And the large man who had eaten Usato's lunch prepared a meal to make up for it. Usato, still holding a grudge, began to argue with the other trainees, which quickly escalated into a fight. The large man threatened to knock Usato out, but Usato was ready to take him on. Celia wondered if it was appropriate to just watch, and Kazuki assured her that it was part of Usato's daily routine. Usato had adapted remarkably quickly, prompting Kazuki to return to his training to avoid falling behind. Suzune also prepared to resume training, realizing that all three of them must have been brought to this world for a purpose. That evening, Usato relaxed in a bath, contemplating how he needed to better manage his Riz so as not to unsettle Suzune again. He acknowledged that she was correct. His body had undergone a significant transformation. His muscles had healed repeatedly after being strained from the intense exercise, resulting in a well-toned physique. However, his role was to rescue people on the battlefield, and he wondered if his mental strength matched his physical prowess. The following morning, Rose informed Usato that they would be venturing out, causing concern among the others. A guard at the gate was visibly shaken when Rose expressed her intention to show her subordinate the outside world. He hurriedly opened the gate for her, and Usato realized that Rose's mere presence was enough to intimidate someone. Usato was curious about their destination, but Rose instructed him to remain silent and follow her. They eventually arrived at a forest known as the Darkness of Linger, notorious for its monstrous inhabitants. To Usato's surprise, Rose instructed him not to return until he had hunted a grand grizzly. Usato believed there was a misunderstanding. The book he had read even stated that just the lead blue grizzlies were extremely dangerous. Rose asserted that he should be able to defeat one easily, but Usato countered that he had only been running all this time and had no combat experience. Without offering any explanation, Rose propelled him towards the forest. Thanks for watching, please subscribe, and see you on the next episode. Love you guys.